On this Saturday night, the facts are in. Now the debate begins. After 6 weeks of testimony, lawyers make the case about invoking the Emergencies Act.
The freedom of no one is safe unless the freedom of everyone is safe.
Plus, we check the temperature on where Canadians stand on the issue. A mother's dire plea.
How much money did they ask for?
I think it was $500 immediately.
Teen boys exploited online. What inflation? The Black Friday bonanza boosting online sales across the border. And coach's call, the candid comments, and the yellow card ahead of Canada's next World Cup showdown.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. The facts are in, but the Emergencies Act inquiry is not over yet. After 6 weeks of grueling testimony, more than 75 witnesses, and several thousand documents entered into evidence, lawyers are now arguing over what it all means and if the government went too far or was warranted in invoking the Emergencies Act last winter. David Akin has our top story tonight.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was the last of nearly 70 witnesses to testify at the Public Order Emergency Commission, but the commission's work is far from done. Now, lawyers and experts are pleading their case to Commissioner Justice Paul Rouleau.
These are summaries of the position of the various parties.
The government's lawyer said the evidence strongly supports the decision to invoke the Emergencies Act.
The measures taken for dealing with the emergency were proportional, effective, time-limited, and charter-compliant.
Not so fast, say a host of opponents to that view.
First, that they interfered with provincial powers, and second, that they infringed on the rights of citizens.
7 provinces advised the Government of Canada that they did not support the invocation of the Act in their province, that there was no need, and that they had the capability and authorities to deal with the situation.
Civil liberties groups raised the alarm that the Trudeau government's actions could make it easier for future governments to violate the rights of Canadians in the name of an emergency.
The freedom of no one is safe unless the freedom of everyone is safe. We urge the Commission to bear this tenet in mind as it examines what the government did and considers what future governments may do.
And a lawyer representing a group of the Ottawa convoy protesters argued Trudeau should lose his job.
If there ever was a time for a prime minister to step down, now is that time.
And yet, a poll done in mid-October found that most Canadians, about 2/3, think otherwise. In fact, they think that Trudeau's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act was the right call. And a majority in every region of the country held that view, even if it was a narrow majority in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. The next phase of the Commission's work begins Monday, with more than 50 experts and academics ready to give their advice on everything from criminal law and policing powers to freedom of expression and even cryptocurrency. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is starting to speak out more about China and its potential interference here in this country. But Melanie Joly is stopping short of confirming potential interference in the 2019 federal election, as we first reported here on Global News. Mercedes Stevenson joins us now with more on this week's The West Block. Mercedes.
Farah, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly has been ramping up her criticism of China, saying earlier this month that Canadians should consider the, quote, geopolitical risks of doing business in China. And at the G20 just 10 days ago, Joly spoke with her Chinese counterpart, saying that Canada won't accept any form of meddling in our governments, in our elections, and we won't tolerate any form of foreign interference in Canada. In an interview to air on this week's The West Block, Joly said the government needs to do more to deal with foreign interference and China's increasingly aggressive foreign policy.
There is a growing concern on the part of, obviously us, but also the Americans and also our European allies, that China is bit by bit not respecting international norms or trying to bend or change these international norms to its own benefits. Also, China is investing massively in its own military capacities, and therefore this is changing the security environment. So that's why we need to step up our game.
When asked, Minister Jolie would not say, however, if she was briefed by CSIS about alleged attempts of foreign interference by China in the 2019 election, a story first reported by Global News' Sam Cooper. Jolie would only say that she wasn't the Foreign Affairs Minister during the time period when the alleged attempts at interference took place.
Well, I was not a foreign minister when, the allegations of the report of the story were made. What I can tell you, though, that in general, foreign interference is intolerable. In general, we will not accept any foreign states meddling in our, country's affairs.
Melanie Jolie was the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time when sources say the briefings took place, January of 2022. So we still don't know if she received one. Jolie did, however, raise additional concerns about foreign interference in Canada, both online and through propaganda, as major concerns she has.
But I'm also concerned is the question of foreign interference online. And Mercedes, this is affecting all our democracies. It's something that our friends, the Americans, have to deal with, our European partners as well. And so this is something that I take very seriously on the margin of the UN General Assembly.
We'll have more on how the government plans to deal with China from the Foreign Affairs Minister, as well as an analysis of the Prime Minister's testimony at the Emergencies Act Commission ahead on the show tomorrow. Farah?
Okay, Mercedes Stevenson, thank you so much for that. And again, you can catch the full interview tomorrow morning on the West Block right here on Global. Late night protests erupted in northwest China a day after a deadly fire engulfed an apartment block, trapping residents and killing at least 10 people. This dramatic video shows protesters pushing barriers, shouting for the government to end the lockdown imposed in early August, which officials did today following public pressure. People living in the building say strict COVID restrictions made it difficult to escape the flames. Several major cities, including Beijing, are experiencing a surge in cases and are ramping up construction of quarantine facilities and field hospitals again. A landslide on the Italian island of Ischia off the coast of Naples swept away lampposts and overturned cars early this morning.
Allora, questa montagna è cascata.
It comes after torrential rain triggered flooding overnight. The death toll is still unclear, but an Italian government official says around 10 people are missing. The last fatal landslide on the island was in 2006 when a father and his 3 daughters were killed. There may be a glimmer of hope to end a simmering African conflict that's forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes. In recent months, the rebel group M23 has seized several towns in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's now a new ceasefire in place as of this Friday. But as Mike Armstrong explains, the question is whether it'll hold.
With each offensive by M23, more Congolese are pushed from their homes. In the DRC's province of North Kivu, according to the UN, just in the last month, close to 200,000 people have become refugees in their own country. This man says he fled his village not out of fear, but out of panic. The DRC's armed forces have had their hands full with M23. The Tutsi-led rebel militia was formed 10 years ago. In 2012, it briefly captured and occupied the provincial capital of Goma. It was eventually pushed out of the country until a resurgence this year. The Congolese government accuses neighboring Rwanda of supporting the group, something Rwanda denies. But the United Nations said in August there is solid evidence Rwandan soldiers have fought alongside M23 troops. Now there is new help for the Congolese army. Kenya and Burundi have sent soldiers as part of a regional force to fight M23 and other militias. Uganda is set to send soldiers as well. The United Nations has had troops on the ground for more than 20 years and spent billions, but there are still more than 100 active militia groups in addition to M23. The new regional force isn't supposed to be about peacekeeping. The Congolese army's spokesperson says the regional force is on a purely offensive mission. Now, there is a ceasefire agreement signed this week. There was a summit held in Angola aimed at calming growing tensions between Congo and Rwanda. It ended with a declaration that fighting was to stop as of Friday. But M23 was not part of the talks. In a statement, the group says it accepts the ceasefire but will defend itself if attacked. The Congolese government, meanwhile, is promising that if peace isn't achieved with the agreement, it is prepared to take action. The Foreign Affairs Minister says any group that doesn't take the hand of peace will be fought by the new regional force. While protesters took to the streets of Goma after the agreement was signed, they marched on the French and British consulates, they say, to denounce the international community's silence at what's going on. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
In Ukraine, civilians are fleeing the southern city of Kherson after days of intensive shelling by Russian forces. Crews are scrambling to restore heat, electricity, and water services. Kherson was among several cities to face heavy Russian artillery fire and drone attacks in recent days. Moscow has ratcheted up its attacks on critical infrastructure after several battlefield setbacks. Millions of Ukrainians have been suffering power cuts across the country. Supply chain concerns ahead of Christmas. Coming up, forecasts show big holiday spending in the U.S., but how people are paying has some analysts worried.
When there's nothing but a slow glowing dream.
Irene Cara, who produced some of the most iconic pop anthems of the 80s, has passed away at the age of 63. Her publicist announced the news this morning on social media, writing a cause of death was currently unknown. The Oscar, Golden Globe, and Grammy-winning singer and actress was best known for the theme songs of Fame and Flashdance. In some parts of Canada, Black Friday wasn't as busy as expected, but in the U.S., despite near record high inflation, American shoppers spent a record $9.1 billion online. It's a positive sign for retailers seeing slow sales throughout 2022. As Jennifer Johnson reports, Americans are not only buying big, but they're traveling far and wide this Thanksgiving weekend.
From Black Friday to Small Business Saturday to Cyber Monday, U.S. retailers are desperate for business. And already consumers are opening up their wallets this holiday season. Online spending on Black Friday was up 2.3%.
And beyond that, we're expecting retail sales during the holiday season to grow between 6 and 8% to $960 billion.
The growth comes as consumer prices keep rising, up 7.7% from this time last year. Shoppers are spending, but one poll shows 48% are using their credit cards, which concerns some analysts.
A lot of people have cut their savings rate, they've dipped into their savings account, and they are running up their credit card, using credit more than debit.
166 million people are expected to shop over the long Thanksgiving weekend break. That's up more than 8 million from last year. Retailers want shoppers in their stores and malls, something they haven't seen much of lately.
A lot of people were skeptical during the pandemic, and to see a crowd like we have today, it's nice to see.
With the holiday shopping season here, analysts are keeping a close eye on possible labor problems. Some protests and walkouts against Amazon have begun, and there are concerns about a potential rail strike in December that could further slow down the already slow supply chain. But this weekend anyway, trains, planes, and automobiles are on the move, as at least 55 million Americans travel to loved ones. Most are driving despite high gas prices, but millions of others are braving the skies, where air ticket prices are up about 5% from 2019.
It's a 13-hour trip, and the ticket costs $1,058.
Pre-holiday travel has been relatively smooth, but some bad weather is moving in, including wintry mixes in New England and the Great Lakes region. And heavy precipitation is hitting parts of Texas, with snow also falling in normally warm El Paso. But the worst of the weather is expected on Sunday, which, according to the U.S. Transportation Security Administration, is the busiest travel day of the year. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Battling sextortion. Ahead, the youth who are becoming at risk of being targets online. RCMP in Manitoba say a 25-year-old woman and her 2-year-old child are safe after they were allegedly abducted on the side of a highway near Portage La Prairie yesterday afternoon.
The victim and the male suspect were not known to each other.
It was later determined that she came across the male suspect who was pretending to be in medical distress by the side of the road. She stopped her vehicle to assist, at which time he got into the vehicle and demanded that she drive him to Winnipeg. This was an extremely difficult situation, and we would like to acknowledge the victim who did everything she could to keep herself and her child safe.
Police are now on the hunt for 62-year-old Michael Stephen Klimchuk of Winnipeg. He's wanted on numerous charges, including kidnapping and forcible confinement. A stark warning from police agencies about a significant rise in online sexual exploitation of children. It's known as sextortion. Internet blackmailers target youth, but the largest increase in cases involves teen boys. For this week's episode of The New Reality, Dallas Flexhog reports on this disturbing trend.
This mom, who we are calling Sarah to protect her identity, is speaking out to warn other parents after her teenage son was a victim of sextortion.
How much money did they ask for?
I think it was $500 immediately, or the video would be shared with all of his friends and family.
Sextortion is a form of online blackmail where criminals deceive children and teens through various digital platforms to obtain explicit images. Victims are then extorted for money or more material. This type of crime has been growing at an alarming rate, especially in 2022.
At the start of the year, we were noting in the first 6 months that we had had a 150% increase in the number of reports related to sextortion. 90% of the extortion victims that are reporting to us are young males.
The perpetrator convinced Sarah's son, who was 15 years old at the time, to send a sexually explicit video. He believed he was flirting with a young woman.
This person led him to believe they were sexting. Let's do it on video, while the video was recorded, and then used it as blackmail for the money.
Girls are being targeted too, experts say, but the offenders tend to be interested in them sexually, so girls are being blackmailed for more content. The perpetrators extorting boys are often tied to organized crime.
Boys are getting extorted for money. The boys will send a picture or a video. They will then get a message immediately back saying, well, thanks for the picture, but I want money now.
In recent years, a terrifying pattern has emerged. Some sextortion victims, fearing no way out, have taken their own lives, sometimes within hours of being targeted.
It is truly terrifying to have this happen to you. There's no safe place. There's nowhere to retreat from these images and the harassment that follows them.
As for Sarah, her son blocked the extorter immediately, but it didn't help. The offender sent the video to her son's friends and family on Facebook.
He lost his girlfriend. He also lost a lot of his friends. It's heartbreaking to watch their life crumble.
To help with the emotional toll, Sarah made sure her son was receiving counseling and is relieved he came to her so she could help.
Had we not done that immediately and taken such fast action, I don't think we'd have our son today.
Dallas Flexhog, Global News.
To learn more about Dallas's story into the rise in teen sextortion, watch The New Reality tonight on Global. Getting ready for Canada versus Croatia. What's at stake for tomorrow's do-or-die World Cup game? To the FIFA World Cup now, as the Canadian men's team gears up for their high-stakes showdown against Croatia tomorrow. Now, it stirred some controversy already. In an interview earlier this week, Coach John Herdman said they were going to, quote, F Croatia. He later clarified he was impassioned and he meant no disrespect. Today, he had much more to say about their matchup. There's definitely a lot at stake for Canada. Not only are they aiming to make their first goal in a World Cup ever, they need to pick enough points against Croatia and Morocco next week to advance to the next stage. And joining me now from Qatar is Joshua Cloke, a writer for The Athletic who's been closely following the World Cup journey of the Canadian men's team. Actually, he has a book about it called The Voyagers. Josh, great to see you. Let me start with those comments. You heard them. How does that reflect the mindset in terms of what's going on going into this match?
Well, I mean, this Canadian men's national team has always been, under John Herdman, fearless. And I think if you're John Herdman, you probably look at this team after the loss against Belgium and you might see some heads hanging low and you need to kind of galvanize your team. So by him kind of standing up for his team in front of the media, I think that's an effort to kind of remind this team that their World Cup is far from over, even after a loss in the first game.
Josh, what's Canada doing to prepare right now? I mean, what have they learned from their previous game with Belgium?
John Herdman said today in his media availability that Belgium and Croatia are remarkably different teams, and they're going to be different tests. So I think what you're going to see is that Canada needs to play a little more tactically structured game, maybe not just go after the game as fast as they did. I expect Canada to put a few more players in the midfield and try and slow down the tempo of possession, try and wait Croatia out. They played a real run-and-gun style against Belgium, and I don't know if that's going to work against Croatia, a team that's very, very smart off the ball. So that's probably what they learned going forward, is that they're going to have to be a little more tactically inventive.
Okay, smart off the ball is one thing you said. What other strengths and weaknesses should we know about Croatia, and should Canada take note of?
I mean, they are a remarkably experienced side, led by Luka Modric, who is arguably the best midfielder of this generation. They have the ability to just kind of wait teams out and be very, very patient off the ball. Again, they're a remarkably smart team. And I think what you're going to find is, whereas Belgium looked to be kind of phased by Canada's pace and verticality, Croatia might not be. And obviously, with all the controversy surrounding this game, you think that Croatia is probably going to be able to get up for this a little bit more, because they feel that they've been disrespected by John Herdman. So there's probably some emotions at play for them as well.
All right, Joshua Cloak from Qatar, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Farah Nasser. Tonight's Your Canada is Port Stanley, Ontario. Take a look at this. This is on the north shore of Lake Erie. Cody Evans snapped this perfect pic, what he's calling Poseidon's wrath, during that wicked lake effect snowstorm that buried Buffalo. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.